Welcome to Coruzant Technologies, home of the Digital Executive Podcast. Welcome to the Digital Executive. Today's guest is Alex Hoffman. Alex Hoffman has navigated a life rich with diverse experiences and a relentless drive for entrepreneurship. Growing up in various cities across the Northeast and later relocating to Texas during high school, his sense of wanderlust was evident early on. His journey has taken him from Nashville to Atlanta, New York to Boston, and even overseas to Bali and Thailand. Hoffman's entrepreneurial spirit was apparent from a young age. Determined to buy a computer, he undertook a paper route to earn the necessary funds, eventually purchasing a Sony Vaio that symbolized his independence and drive. Alex's interest in cryptocurrency began with experimenting with Bitcoin mining on his MacBook in 2011, sparked his curiosity, which further intensified during a series of Solana hackathons with a friend. Today, with 14 years of entrepreneurial experience, Alex Hoffman is the co-founder and head of ecosystems at Moveposition, a universal credit hub designed to provide secure, efficient, and transparent financial services. Well, good afternoon, Alex. Welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks, Brian.
Absolutely. I appreciate you making the time. Generally, I know you're out of Austin. We in that same time zone here centrally, but I know you're calling from the great state of New Hampshire at the moment. So time differences can be a challenge, but again, appreciate it. And Alex, jumping into your first question here, your journey in entrepreneurship began at a young age. Can you share more about how that early drive to buy a computer with a paper route influenced your approach to building businesses?
Yeah, sure. So, my father was a serial entrepreneur and I guess he still is. But he had a successful career. I watched him try repeatedly to start businesses on the side of, he was working for companies his whole career. He still is. And he was never that successful, but he just kept trying. He had multiple real estate endeavors that he did. He bought a store at one point. He had part of a car dealership too. And I think he really inspired me to just try over and over again. I think that's a big part of entrepreneurship is you've just got to keep throwing darts at the wall. It's funny you say that this narrative now has gone up about me wanting to buy that computer, which I was thinking about this today, that I think that's the only time I've ever been driven by a specific thing or like the want of a thing to start a company. And I've spent half my life starting companies at this point. But ever since then, the drive has been more focused around building a team. I really get a lot out of that. I really love mentoring people and watching people grow and just being super excited about a product. There have been multiple times now where I've seen an opportunity. And I think my father was the same, where he'd see an opportunity and go for it. He just didn't turn out to be a very good business guy. I think he's good at identifying opportunities. And so that has been something that has repeatedly gotten me going as well.
That's awesome. Your father was an inspiration for you, and you learned a lot from that. And I think our parents can be sometimes our best teachers, best coaches, mentors. So I appreciate the backstory. It's very helpful and love these stories. So Alex, you've had several entrepreneurial ventures, particularly in the healthcare sector, leading to notable acquisitions. What were the biggest lessons you learned from those successful exits?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my father for a second again, because the biggest exit I've had has been the healthcare company. And that was, we started that together. And, one of the things we found is that I was good at the business side of things, and he's like an absolute subject matter expert in his area. I think that was one big lesson I've had, is that you need all sorts of different people to form a company that really works. And you need to focus on what you're good at and let other people focus on what they're good. I think that, another thing that I've learned is you learn more from your failures than from your successes. And that was one of the things I learned before starting a healthcare company was I'm sort of a jack of all trades, and I'm pretty quick to learn new things. And so in early companies that I was starting, I would try to do everything. I had a furniture company at one point, and I learned so much about SEO and about pay-per-click advertising online and whatnot. And I was doing okay with that. But as soon as I hired somebody else to do that for me, who was really an expert at that, company did so much better. And so, yeah, I mean, one lesson is make sure that you're bringing in the right people. Don't spend your time on something that you can pay somebody else who's going to do a much better job for a reasonable rate, obviously. Another big one, I think, is just to, at least for me, to stick with my gut. There have been a number of times where I've had something frankly go wrong that I felt really strongly about, and I let a partner make a decision at the end of the day that I disagreed with. And one of them is still coming to bite me in the butt to today, even years later. I've been dealing with it this week with a company I'm not even actively involved with anymore. So I think sort of fine tuning your instincts as a business person and then knowing when to trust it is really important. And the last thing I'd say is just to lead with kindness and generosity, right? I've been in multiple situations with partners where we haven't seen eye to eye on how people should be compensated and this sort of how you should share information with your team or whatever. You know, it's in many ways, those are similar, even though they don't seem immediately similar. It's so important to make people feel like they're part of something, make people feel like, especially with an early venture, right? Like they understand what's going on. They understand why we're doing this. Even during the really tough moments, you know, when things are going wrong. I mean, I think that oversharing is, in my experience, the right move. I know personally, like I'd rather know everything. And so if I'm on the other side of this, where somebody is not sharing everything they know, and that's just going to make me scared, and I'm not going to operate as my best self. During the good times, you've got to make sure that you're really treating people fairly, compensating them well, making them feel bought into whatever you're doing.
Thank you. I think that's great. You know, there's a lot of key takeaways here. Obviously, life experience is the biggest teacher, I think, in business and life and that sort of thing. Transparency is good. And again, hiring great people, you know, they're the experts. You hired them, let them do what they're good at. So I appreciate those messages in there. And Alex, if you could briefly share, Moveposition, the company you co-founded, focuses on providing secure and transparent financial services. Can you explain what Moveposition does and what motivated you to create a universal credit hub?
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of background. We started building it was originally Concordia, and the company has gone through a couple of evolutions since, in order to build sort of a cross-chain credit hub, a universal credit hub for crypto, where you could use the assets you have wherever they are and leverage their value wherever you want, which is something that you can do for the most part in traditional finance, a little bit harder in Web3 and crypto. And I actually went through a tough moment. Another protocol that I'd started got hacked, and that led to some soul searching and to really doubling down on what I wanted to focus on. And we were able to evolve what we were building to be focused more on asset safety than just about, you know, being able to leverage your money wherever you want. And so we spent a long time working with some of the best people that we could find in the traditional finance world on how portfolios should be valued. And this ended up leading us to build what is now Superposition and Moveposition. They're two products that are basically the same thing on different chains, which is an extremely safe and efficient money market for Web3. Crypto has an issue in that the way that assets are valued as collateral when you're wanting to borrow against them is done in a very static and antiquated way. It's done something akin to like 1920s or 1950s traditional finance. And traditional finance has been solving these problems basically since the mid 80s when there was a big crash. And every time there's been another crash, they've refined these risk models and made them better and better. And for some reason, the future of finance, Web3, is not utilizing even 20-year-old risk models from traditional finance. So that ended up being our focus. And what we ended up building was a money market that uses what's called a value at risk model, where it's actually taking all of the assets and liabilities that you have in your portfolio and it is looking at how they're correlated. It's looking at how volatile each asset is, and it's trying to determine how much leverage you're able to take at any given moment. So the outcome of this is a lot of what people are trying to do, whether it's in traditional finance or in Web3, they are taking correlated assets and they're going long against them. So the easy Web3 example is there are what's called liquid stake derivatives, and people will borrow liquid stake derivatives against the core derivative on the ecosystem, or the core asset on the ecosystem. So that would be ETH on Ethereum, and they use ETH or they really are using liquid stake ETH to borrow ETH against it. Since those two are correlated, since you can trade between them and go in and out of those two assets, you should be able to go super long and get a lot of value for your collateral there. But unfortunately, the way that virtually every other money market works in Web3 is they just assign these static values. If you've got liquid staked ETH, you're able to borrow up to 70% of the value against it, or you're able to borrow 80% of the value against it, whatever it might be. Whereas we built a system that actually calculates it. That's what Moveposition is. It allows for extremely efficient and safe borrowing against collateral, essentially.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you shared, obviously, you hit a challenge, with security early on, but also you wanted to solve a problem. And the way this automatically calculates these for you makes it a lot easier for the average Joe that wants to get into this market and start do some investing and buying of things. It's just opening that door for more and more people to jump onto the DeFi train, as I call it. So thank you. And Alex, last question of the day, looking ahead, what trends in cryptocurrency, blockchain, or fintech excite you the most? And how do you see Moveposition playing a role in shaping the future of financial services?
So I originally got into a DeFi, into Web3, mainly because I was excited about democratization of the sorts of financial products that I don't have access to. Most people don't have access to unless you're, a large fund or a high net worth individual. A lot of the ways that these groups make money, it's not something that we have access to at all, unless you want to drop $10-20 million into something. So the tokenization of real world assets is something that I think really, as we drive that forward, it's going to get super interesting, allowing people to sort of make money in new creative ways that as an individual who's not worth $100 million have never been able to before. It's a big part of why we built these products, really. They support ETH and USDC and whatnot, all these tokens right now, but it's all meant to be future facing for as that future starts to evolve, where we're seeing more products. A really interesting one I saw recently was a company that takes whole life insurance policies and they allow you to tokenize them and borrow against them, because that's an asset that I think there are some ways to borrow against a whole life policy, but it's not easy. And if you can just tokenize it, then it's a very clear cut thing to do at that point. Assuming you've got something like Moveposition or Superposition where you can just drop that collateral in there. And the other thing is the abstraction of really the experience of blockchain away from how users are using it right now. Using any sort of DeFi is clunky and it's complicated. Yeah, I get to my friends regularly, hey, how do I do that? Should I be doing this? And I'm trying to explain to them how to get wallets and how to use their ledger. And like a lot of times their eyes just glass over at that point because they're realizing that all this is more complicated than it should be. And this is a real issue for Web3, as I'm sure a lot of people listening know. But the more that the experience gets abstracted away to where the sort of apps that people are used to using allow for blockchain to be working in the background, the more users there obviously will get into Web3 and the more opportunity there is. And like a perfect example of this is, if we were to integrate something like Moveposition into a Venmo-like app, you could use your assets that are just sitting in there doing nothing. You're probably not even getting interest on them as lending into a pool that we have. And you could just have this happen automatically to where you're going to automatically get whatever the market rate is on the assets that you're holding. And this could be really seamless, really simple. And I think there are people working on this right now. So I'm really looking forward to that future personally.
That's great. It's awesome. And I've had many folks in the Web3 space and beyond talk about tokenization. Real estate's a big one. Had many guests that are in that space or are looking to get into that space. But you're absolutely right. There's, I think, a whole new horizon of different investments that people can get into. And I think it's just very promising. So I appreciate that. And Alex, it was certainly a pleasure having you on today. And I look forward to speaking with you real soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate it.
Bye for now.